Welcome, everyone. This is Imagine All the People podcast, where we learn to appreciate our experiences and cherish the bond we have as human beings. I am your host, Daniel, and today I had the opportunity to talk to Mick, who was a victim of the terrorist bombing during the Boston Marathon in 2013.
My name is Mick. I'm 18 years old. I was born and raised in Massachusetts. I'm a college student and I'm working towards a degree in digital media, and I'm a survivor of the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing.
And Mick, for those who don't know, can you explain a little bit more about the Boston Marathon bombing?
Yes, so the Boston Marathon is, in general, one of the major marathons in the world. There are 7. And in 2013, on April 15th, there was two explosions, one closer to the finish line and another one on the same street, on Boylston Street, but not as close as the first one. I happened to be closest to the first explosion.
And what led you to watch the Boston Marathon that day?
So my dad has been a runner for about 10 years at this point, and he had a goal in mind that he wanted to run the Boston Marathon. So we were there for him and to support him as he would be running the Boston Marathon for the first time.
And what made you choose where you were standing that day?
We decided to be at the finish line, but we didn't want to be so close as to where we wouldn't be able to see him among the crowd of people that would be there. But we also didn't want to be too far from the finish line itself because we wanted to see him cross, but we didn't want to have to kind of dig through a crowd to get to him after the fact.
And who were you with watching your dad run the Boston Marathon at that time?
A lot of people were. My mom was, my sister, her boyfriend at the time, a few family friends, an aunt and uncle, and my grandparents, I believe, were the people that were there.
And can you describe to me a little bit more about the scene before the Boston Marathon? Were you able to say bye or good luck to your dad? And what was it like overall in your household?
Yes, so I actually didn't see my dad that morning. He had gotten up earlier. I think he had to get up around 4 in the morning to catch a bus to go to Boston to leave. So I actually never saw my dad that morning. But I was with my mom. I woke up around 6 in the morning and we took a train out to Boston, and everyone was excited. We had posters made for him. We had T-shirts printed. We were all ecstatic to see my dad.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit more about the initial blast of the bomb?
Yes, so I was roughly, I would say, 20 to 30 feet away from the first explosion, and I was against a wooden fence. And the only way I can describe how it sounds and felt to, like, my 11-year-old self would be that it sounded very similar to a firework if the firework had gone off right next to your head. And the force of it just felt like, I was 11 years old at the time. I was about, 4 feet tall. Felt like a football player had just tackled me, straight into this fence. So it was very brunt, I guess, the force of it. And it was just very loud. It was surprising, definitely. But we hadn't even known that it was like a bombing at first. So it was definitely a weird experience. It was scary, but we had not known the severity of what was going on when it happened because there was no way to tell that it was a bomb at first.
Mm-hmm. And before the initial blast, did you feel like something was different about that day?
I didn't. It was actually, we all had nerves because my dad was only a block away. He was due to cross the finish line only a few minutes before the explosion happened. So we were all high on adrenaline just waiting to see him. So there was nothing that was off-putting about the moments before.
Mm-hmm. And how far exactly were you from the initial blast?
I would say I was about 20 to 30 feet, if I could remember properly.
Okay, and what was your initial reaction to the explosion of the bomb?
I remember I was on the ground from the force of the blast, and I remember being confused because we had thought that there was some malfunction with perhaps a firework or something that was supposed to go on that day. So I remember being confused when I was on the ground, and I turned to look up at the sky, and I saw this thick cloud of smoke, and I knew the minute I saw that something happened. And I didn't know why, because at the age of 11, like, I knew that there was bad things in the world. I knew about 9/11, but I didn't think that would ever happen to me. So when I saw that and I saw panic around me, I knew that something bad was happening. So it instantly went from a really good day to a really scary day in a matter of half a second.
And how did the people around you react to the initial explosion?
Um, there was a lot of screaming, a lot of confusion. Everyone was just taken aback by what had happened. No one could believe that something like that was happening right now. And I think most people that were there and that could get up and kind of get out of that situation all had the same idea to just flee. Or, if someone next to them was injured, to help them, and just kind of what would make the most sense in that, in like a survival situation, is what we did.
So where did you guys run to?
We actually had planned on running up Boylston Street, which was the street of the marathon attacks. We had run up the street until a police officer had stopped us and told us that we couldn't continue running up Boylston because there had been another explosion. So at that point, we were like, whoa, like, what is going on? So we had to cut down another street and run through alleyways. And we had ended up at like a crossroads. So it was like four streets at like this intersection. And that's where we ended up calling family, meeting up with people, trying to figure out a ride. And at that point, like, we were all together. So my dad had caught up to us. Like any other family members that were kind of like straggling around the finish line, at that point, we had all met up at one specific place and just figured a way out of Boston.
But was your dad ever able to finish that race?
He didn't. He never got to finish the race despite being so close, and they sent him his medal in the mail as if he did finish.
And now that you're looking back to that day, are there any specific sounds, smells, or pictures that still play in your head?
Um, yes and no. I think like the sound of fireworks definitely for a long time had affected me because it sounded pretty much the exact same. Um, I can't remember a specific smell of that day just because it's been so long since then, but definitely just the sound of loud bangs. If someone drops a book next to me, I kind of like jump just because of like any sudden noises, that type of thing. If people push me from behind, kind of like to scare me, to like kind of like freak me out behind a doorway or something like that, I definitely like have a stronger reaction than I normally would have. I'm guessing if I didn't have this experience.
And what are some things that changed for you after your experience?
My parents were very cautious about what they put in front of me after that day. They didn't want to, I guess, affect me. I guess they didn't want to like trigger anything, um, in a sense where they didn't want me to like regress in any progress that I've made, kind of like breaking out of the shell of being scared to go into public places again. And I couldn't watch the news for a long time after, just because it was all that the news talked about. It definitely it changed a lot of things. Just how cautious my parents were about things that were being said, and what I was taking in.
And being so close to the bombs, did the initial explosion affect you physically in any way?
I wasn't injured as badly as other people. I luckily, me and my family just walked away with some soreness from being pushed and running and stuff. But otherwise, I am completely fine physically.
And being so young and experiencing such a catastrophic event at that age, how did the bombing affect your mental development?
Um, I think it affected me because I had to face my own mortality at such a young age because, as everyone knows, ignorance is bliss, and when you're a child, you don't really realize that, death is a thing, or like is such a morbid reality until like you grow up. And I had to face that reality very quickly at a kind of young age. And it just it made me realize that evil was very prevalent in the world and it could be anywhere. So it definitely affected how I see social situations, how I see the world, in a sense where, there is pure evil out there, and there will be people who just want to do bad things. So it definitely had an effect on how I see the world, and it it just kind of broke that childhood innocence for me, I guess.
And was this broken innocence a quick switch, like an overnight change, or did it take a long time for you to take on this new perspective?
I think it was very much a learned lesson. I mean, I see the world more positively now because I try to surround myself at least with more positive things to kind of not see the world in such a dark light. Because there is good in the world, even though there's a lot of bad, there still is a lot of good. But that was definitely like a learned thing for me, where I just kind of developed into this attitude of, there's bad things in the world. It's all inevitable. The world is a bad place, and kind of like unteaching myself that as well, because I had to realize that, inevitably there's going to be bad things, but there's also very good things as well.
So there's this process of acknowledging that there was still bad in this world, but at the same time, in understanding that it was better for you to dwell on the good. So, what was a overall recovery process like?
So like being exposed to such evil at that age, it made me very pessimistic. It made me kind of dark. Like I grew a dark humor. I was just in a dark spot for a while because I was exposed to such like a harsh reality, and it it just made me like a bad person. Like I just remember I wasn't very confident in myself. I wasn't confident in other people. I regressed. I didn't really want many friends after that point. I didn't want to open up to people. I still have problems opening up to people because of it. And as I grew up, I kind of had to realize that like I couldn't keep I couldn't live the rest of my life that way. I'm still young. Like I still have so many opportunities in my life where, just kind of like hanging on to this event, it's not worth it. Like there's so much more to look forward to. It happened when I was so young, and there's no reason to kind of hang on to it as much as I had been. So I had to get out of my old ways of being so like down in the dumps all the time, and so like angry at the world for what it put me through, mentally at least. And I just kind of had to teach myself that, like there's no reason to be so angry all the time and so upset with how things happened and where you were in your life, or where I was in my life, because, there's so much more to look forward to. Like I had
Mm-hmm.
hobbies that I liked that I would just turn away from because I was mad, or like I was upset because, why would the world want to put me through something? Like I don't want to do anything. And I just realized that like it wasn't worth it. It's not worth holding so much hate in me over one event that happened 6 years ago. You know what I mean? Like I just had to like unteach myself that there like I had to teach myself that there's no point of just holding hate in my heart for these people that did this to me. And that flipped my mindset around drastically, in a sense where now I'm overall more of a happy person. Like anyone that knows me knows that like I'm always laughing, I'm always joking around. I try to be as pleasant as possible to people. If someone's having a rough day, I'm here to help. I'm more interested in my hobbies. I have way more that I do now hobby wise, because I'm into art. So I do a lot more with that. I push myself in better places than I would um, beforehand. So it definitely just like it was just a light switch in my mind that made me realize that like I can't keep living in the dumps. Like I can't keep letting this drag me down.
And how long did this recovery process take?
Throughout my entire high school career, basically. So, in like early middle school, it had happened when I was in sixth grade. So I had a little bit of junior high left, and then high school. So definitely like my early high school, I had that teenage angst of, oh, the world's such a bad place, blah blah blah. And then the second I kind of hit junior year, that was when I realized like, what am I so angry about? And like, why am I so upset all the time? And that was when it was just a light switch. I think it was maturity that kicked in of me like realizing that, it's not even worth my time.
Mhm. But through it all, do you think that there are any positive lessons that you have learned through this incident?
Um, yes, because that day, I had realized growing up that there was so much positivity in Boston despite the tragedy happening all around us. An example of that would be the fact that as we were kind of walking down these blocks afterward, figuring out a ride and trying to just find a way home, there were people that lived on these streets inviting neighbors into their apartment buildings and into their homes to contact family, to eat food if they were, if they needed it, to watch the news, to understand what was going on. They were letting strangers into their home at like during this time. And like thinking back on that, I'm like, wow, like there was still like light in darkness in the city of Boston.
Okay. And ultimately, would you say that being a victim of the Boston Marathon bombing is a huge part of your identity to this day?
Yes and no. It's not like I introduce myself and I'm like, "Hi, I survived a marathon bombing." But it's definitely made me the person that I am. I don't think I would see the world the same if I didn't go through this, because I had the struggle of, facing the fact that I or the people around me can just kind of like pass in an instant. It's, facing mortality. And it I don't think that I'd have the same mindset that I do without this happening, because I definitely appreciate moments more and I appreciate people more, because I know that things could just go bad in half a second.
Okay, and I know that this is going to be a tough question for you, but now that you have a hindsight of seeing how all the events have unfolded, would you want to go back to that day and relive the moments again?
This is a difficult question because realistically no one wants to experience trauma. They know they don't
Hmm.
want to ever go through something like this. I would never wish this on anyone. Um, but the the mindset in like having this experience give me wouldn't I wouldn't have the same mindset without having this experience. So I would, if I could erase the trauma of that day without erasing my mindset and how I see the world and how I project myself, then I definitely would. But I don't want to lose the perspective that I have right now.
Okay, and is there anything else that you would like to add on before we end the episode today?
Um, just the fact that, or just the message that, it sounds cheesy, but like there really is always light in darkness. Like I said, like the kindness of Boston really reflected on that day, despite the terrible acts that occurred. And the fact that, again, it's going to sound cheesy, but really do make every moment matter, because, there were people that lost family members in that same week that weren't expecting to lose them. And, things can really change in an instant. And it's not about the bad things. It should always be about the good things.
Okay, and as you have said before, it may sound cliche, but how would you think that we should embrace every moment that we live in today?
Um, just the fact that it is morbid, but dying is the one thing that it's all guaranteed for all of us. We all end up dying. So just with that fact, like you just want to treat every moment as if it really is your last moment, because it definitely could be. It could have been my last day that day 6 years ago. And in knowing that, I treat every moment as if it's my last. I hug people like it's the last time I'll ever hug them. And it is really important to just kind of make sure that like you let people know that you care about them, and that you just let things go very easily. Like if you're mad, let it go. If you're feeling tense towards someone, just let it go, because it's not going to matter in the end.
Okay, Mick, and that wraps up our episode. I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your unique perspective with me.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Thank you so much for listening to Imagine All the People podcast. This was Mick, and we hope you will join us for the next episode.